But I hope the audience here gets the message that you have to do things rather than keep talking about it. And for creating an ecosystem, we have to start from the top. So we have to, and at the bottom is the education, which is the foundation for any kind of ecosystem where diversity and inclusion and equity have to be implemented. There also, I think we still have a lot to do as far as compulsory education for all the people. The rate of literacy, etc., speaks a lot about it. Now, coming to my own organization, we are a farmers organization and we are spread all over the country. And we are basically supposed to be dealing with the farmers. So as far as inclusivity is concerned, I think I can proudly say that we have done a great work in this area. But when it comes to diversity in gender, I would be honest in admitting that a lot needs to be done. And unless the law itself is changed, we can hardly do anything about it. So these are the things which I would just throw for as a food for thought. And now I would rather listen to the faculty members and their expertise in this area and how we propose to promote diversity, equity, and inclusiveness in the context and in the social and economic context that we are here. I think Dr. Jatinder Agarwal has also joined. Welcome, sir. So thank you very much. And
thank you.
Wish that this conference gives us real takeaways and way forward. Thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your perspective. And you rightly said that we need to walk the talk, because it's very easy to give gyan about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But walking on it and actually exemplifying it definitely takes a lot of efforts. And when we talk of such big, these are all very, very big words. And once we see inside our hearts, once we see within our organizations, then immediately we are normally filled with a guilt that maybe, like, as an organization, we are not justifying what we are trying to decipher in front of in the public platforms. But thank you very much for actually raising a very critical issue in terms of walking the talk, wherein actually lies the understanding of diversity. Now, at the same time, sir, you touched upon the very important concept of the knowledge, the education, because we need to give sound education to our students, particularly starting from the schools, in terms of embracing the diversity, equality, and inclusive agenda. Because students are the torch bearers of our nation. They are the future leaders. They are the future corporate captains. So until unless they are sensitized about this very important issue, probably we may be missing the bus. So I'm sure that although we have in curriculum, we can see that in all these NCERT books, there's a lot of discussion about diversity, but I think more needs to be done, and such enabling platforms as we have done today may be one of the one of the things that can actually do some sort of take some baby steps in terms of assuming that each and every one understands this aspect. Now, with this, now I'd like to invite our distinguished expert and panelist, Mr. Shakun Khanna, who is the leader of Human Capital Management Strategy and Transformation for Asia Pacific Oracle, to kindly share his views with the august audience. Over to you, sir, Mr. Khanna.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh, for organizing this. I think this is very, very timely and most important as we talk about. Mr. Singh, always a privilege to see you, meet you, and hear you. So thanks for setting the context. And I really loved the fact that you referred to some global, paradigms and global instances that we are seeing. Of course, Afghanistan is a case study in itself when it comes to inclusion and equality. Because when we look at this subject, it's very interesting because diversity exists. Diversity exists in nature. I think we are all getting confused when we say we have to create diversity in an organization, for example. Diversity outside of the organization is already there. We have to create equality and we have to create inclusion. So in the next about 7-8 minutes, I will be politically incorrect, because I believe political correctness is the biggest roadblock in driving real inclusion and equality. And in a moment, I'll tell you why. I'll talk about the 4 pillars of creating a culture of diversity, inclusion, and equality. And then there are 3 sets that are required. There is a new mindset, there is a new skill set, and there is a new tool set that we will all have to embrace, But please remember, the good part is diversity exists outside of your house, outside of your society, outside of your school. All you have to do is to bring it in. And it has got great advantages. It has been known in the context of business and organizations, having a diverse workforce leads to almost 4 times higher innovation, 2 times greater confidence in ability to deliver results, almost 2 times customer orientation, so it's a no-brainer that it's important. Now the question is, what is stopping us, and why is it that we can't do it? I think first of all is equality has to be a mindset. It's very simple to say that there is diversity, but then there are things that are created often at a subconscious level that we don't even know. I mean, imagine when we are growing up, and I'm now talking about India, gali mohalle mein jab hum khelte the, so somewhere subconsciously it was programmed in our minds that there are some ladkon ke khel and there are some ladkiyon ke khel, and I think the division of the society starts from there. Why would you not have a kids team comprising of both boys and girls playing cricket together? I don't know. And I think that's a deep-seated bias that gets transferred from generation to generation to generation. And while this is happening, I think there are 4 levels or 4 factors that define this whole problem or paradigm. The first is the individual himself or herself. Inclusion and equality is a 2-way process. It's like clapping, and they say tali do haath se bajti hai, and that's very important. When you want an equality, both the parties have to be willing to let go of certain things and gain certain things. So for example, when we talk about gender equality, for example, I have seen that a lot of men are not willing to let go of certain privileges of being a man. At the same time, women may not be comfortable letting go of certain privileges. So for example, ab to khair fir bhi kam ho gaya hai, but still in places I find there are separate queues for men and women, right? Sometimes, of course, there are logical reasons to that, but other times it is just nurturing that bias that we have in the society. If you're going to watch a movie, for example, or buying an airline ticket, why would you expect that kind of differentiation? So I think at an individual level that needs to go, and that applies in all aspects of society, more importantly in the corporate function. The second layer then becomes the immediate work environment. I've seen a lot of managers, for example, hesitate in hiring people from different backgrounds because they are very comfortable with a particular set of people. Just yesterday, I was interviewing someone for some position. The person repeatedly mentioned that I think people who are from sports background tend to perform much better in these kind of roles. And that person, and purposely I will not say he or she here, but that person himself or herself was actually from a avid sports background. And then I realized that the entire team that this person created was non-inclusive. It only had people who were athletic in nature, people who had that, and that happened. So environment plays a very important role. So unless and until that environment is created, somewhere the organization would have pointed this out. Why would an organization not observe this kind of a non-diverse functioning that is happening? Because it's very easy to witness gender diversity or lack of it, but when it comes to other aspects of gender, in our country, even things like caste, religion, creed play a very important role. Some of our states are in election mode, and we are seeing how it is playing out. We are seeing what is happening in one of the southern states around inclusivity of a different nature. So I think all that we need to understand. And then it is the organization's duty. I think most of the organization today have laid out a gender agenda or a diversity agenda, but it has not percolated to the next two levels of environment and of the organizational culture as a whole. And I think the last thing is society as a whole. Singh Saab alluded to Afghanistan, but in certain cases we are not very different, right? As a society, we are not very, very inclusive. Look at how we treat the economic diversity. The rich and poor divide is so huge within our country that I find it very funny when newspapers, publish a news like a son of a rickshaw puller qualified to be an IAS officer. How does that matter, right? And that's one of the examples of our deep-seated classification of the society and non-on. And I think if we have to change the fabric at these four levels, we will need a completely new mindset. And this will be a couple of generations. If we start, at least all of us as parents now have, embraced the fact that son and daughter are pretty much equal. And I think that's going to have a very profound impact in our society. Slowly and gradually, we are looking at sports changing, professions changing, and so on and so forth. And I think that is very encouraging. People need to invest in their skill sets. While it is again, if I point out, while there was a study conducted that a lot of women don't have participation or representation, say at senior management level or board level. But the other side of the story is that a large majority of women are also lacking the right kind of skill sets and experiences. In our organization, for example, we mandated that certain roles have to have diversity candidates, right? And while we had all the intentions, it was extremely difficult to find qualified women, because somewhere, because of the choices that, and it's not just about women, it could be about a particular community, it could be particular religion, it could be particular class, it could be even people with special abilities, for example. And lastly, I think organizations need to have some kind of a tool set. So I just now give you an example how deep-seated non-inclusive behaviors are existing in organizations. Can technology play a role, right? For example, today we have HR technology, which helps organizations understand what is the diversity landscape, what is happening, and stop people from taking decisions that are not inclusive in nature. So, for example, at the time of hiring or at the time of promotions, we've done bell curves, for example. So it is today possible to use technology to do a technology-driven bell curve, which is kind of embracing equality, embracing inclusivity, and therefore creating a diverse organization. So as I stop my 10-minute monologue, I just only want to reiterate one thing one more time, that remember, diversity is natural. It exists out there. All we have to do is to embrace a new mindset, a new skill set, and a new tool set to bring in more equality and more inclusivity in the workforce. Thank you, Mr. Singh. Those were my few thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Khanna, for giving a very, very practical talk, and you in fact touched the chord when you gave different paradigms that how DEI agenda can be practiced in different organizations and where is the missing link. Thank you very much for sharing your concern. And now with this, I'd like to invite our next distinguished speaker, Ms. Indrani Ghosh, the Chief HR Officer at the Global Growth. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Am I audible, everyone?
Yes, yes, you're audible.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And I would also like to congratulate you for selecting a topic which is so pertinent. And I think everybody is trying to work in this sphere. And more discussions that we have in this, I think we will encourage execution in every organization. So, and Shakun beautifully put it that diversity exists in nature. So it's not that, we have to kind of invent the wheel again. It exists. It's just that maybe we don't pay enough attention to it. So even before we go into, what organizations are doing or not. So when we say diversity, it's just about having a heterogeneous mix of identities. So yes, women are definitely a part of it, but then we need to think a little broader. So race, ethnicity, nationality, gender identity, even the veteran's status, physical abilities, mental abilities, sexual orientation, socioeconomic class, etc. So that all should come under the definition of diversity that, or as we discuss it. And in equity, I mean, regardless of identity, all employees are compensated fairly and have the opportunity and support to succeed and grow in their jobs. And finally, the word inclusion. So the identities of all employees are respected, valued, and employees have the opportunity to participate and contribute regardless of their identity. I think if we believe in all of these, only then, the policies that we form or the various interventions that we are planning would be successful if we believe in all of the words that, I mentioned in these definitions. So moving the bar seems to be a very pertinent HR priority in every organization. But the question is, do we only want to chase a number like a compliance target, or do we want to promote inclusivity in the truest sense of the term across every organizational stratum without compromising on meritocracy? And, I'll fall back on the example that Shakun mentioned that, yes, we want to hire people, but we were not able to, or they were not able to find competent people enough. So, so yes, you want to include diversity, but sometimes, you are also at a fix because you are not able to find the right candidate. So yes, skill upgradation is extremely important as we try and include people from different facets of life. And so again, a little asterisk in here is when we talk about diversity, more often than not, what we do is we straitjacket ourselves to increasing the percentage of women employees in the organization. But I think it's time that we track ourselves and embrace every form of diversity. So like I mentioned, sexual orientation, genders, physical, religious, geographical, etc. However, not that I do not say that, we need more women. I mean, in my organization also, there is a scope for improvement in having women employees. And it is also a fact that by not promoting women at the workplace, we experience huge economic losses. And there is an industry report that estimates that only a 10% increase in women participation can boost India's GDP by about $770 billion by 2025. So it's just not about financial gains or just gender diversity. Organizations that are collaborating to create an enabling environment for everyone can explore the actual true potential through meaningful, positive, and measurable actions. The diversity philosophy, so organizations that have made strides in their D&I journeys They focus on a well-articulated diversity agenda. And it is equally important to ensure that the diversity philosophy is communicated to all the stakeholders within or even outside of the organization using the right channels. So um, as we look into the maturity continuum, organizations have transitioned from focusing on initiatives to defining values and model behaviors. So it is just not enough to say that, okay, yes, we have a policy and we are working towards it, but what is the model behavior that is expected from each and every individual is also important. And again, going back to India, so most organizations in India continue to define diversity through the gender lens. And I think that that portion needs to be broadened, and we can bring in different parameters here or different facets here so that we can enhance the definition as we are currently working, and which includes all of us. I think I'm including myself in that as well. And so, and I think the next question that I would say is, who drives this agenda, the D&I agenda? And I think many of you will agree that it is not common for us to see that there is a dedicated role at a senior management position which says that, okay, this is our diversity officer, or someone who's only working on workforce diversity and inclusive practices in an organization. In most cases, the D&I agenda is entrusted to a senior HR person and or a committee that is formed from different parts of the organization. Also, I think, many organizations would say, what is in it for me? Why so much of an effort put towards diversity and inclusion? So I think first, a focus on diversity and inclusion is aligned to organizational values and culture, as they strive to become equal opportunity institutions. So that itself, should propel organizations to believe and work towards it. Moreover, there is a strong business case backed by robust research, which claims that a diverse workforce could result in enhancing innovation, creativity, and is great for ideation and problem solving. The most diverse companies are actually more likely to even outperform less diverse peers on profitability. And lastly, D&I focus is also a boost to the employer brand, which allows easy attraction and retention of talent. And but again, just having a policy or a committee is not enough. We also need to measure it, whether the activities that are being performed are good enough. So metrics for measurement often exist in terms of hiring numbers, so the number of people that were hired from diversity, demographic representation, pay parity, engagement scores, etc. And I think some non-quantifiable metrics can also be referred to, things like employer branding, organizational culture transformation, removal of biases. And my earlier speaker also hinted upon the bias, and it is so true, because he mentioned about, ladke wale game. But I also noticed that when our managers are taking interviews, and it is not that that they want to do it, but sometimes they also have a perception in mind that a certain kind of a personality trait or a certain kind of a person will only be successful. And that is where, we as organizations or parts of HR, we need to come in, because if that is getting imbibed, then there's no way that we can actually look at diversity, because then we'll keep hiring similar people, similar background, and it will defeat the very purpose of even thinking about diversity. So yes, removal of biases, easier said than done, but I think an extremely important item to look at. And I think, it will be incomplete until there is a commitment that starts from the top. So if the CEO, the senior leaders aren't committed to creating a culture that values diversity and is equitable and inclusive, progress will stall. I think the biggest problem for those who are not successful is a lack of both representation and genuine commitment among senior leaders. And good leaders know that what gets measured gets managed. So I think I will just, I have been talking about this, and I'll just take a minute to maybe sum up what I'm trying to say and some practices that can actually help in improving the diversity and inclusion in our organization. So first is, I think, the change of recruitment strategies. So move away from the usual job portals, the top educational institutions. Also, the methodology in which the CVs are sent to the managers, that itself needs to change. Why do we need to know the name of the person, or even the age, or the gender of the person? I just need to see the competencies if it matches to the job requirement. Why can't we start a recruitment like that? Why are we so dependent on job portals? So just a food for thought. Um, certain things like a warm line for advice and coaching. So when you have new people join your organization, there might be anxieties and ambiguities. Everything does not need to be escalated. It could be non-crisis situations, but can we provide support to our employees during those phases? So that's an important discussion. So can we create, warm lines for these? Just-in-time nudges about bias. So training about unconscious bias is one. Also, a reminder to managers before they just step into the interview that yes, biases can creep in, and of course, branding. How the company brands itself is also important. I'll take a minute to just talk about our organization. So yes, we have a women leadership program that we run, and it again goes back to the competency that my earlier speaker spoke. So yes, we want to promote women, but then it's just not important to have, a woman leader at a workstation. We want her to be productive. And hence, we have created an internal system wherein there are constant coaching programs, leadership programs that are available so that we can train the woman for the next level challenges. And we operate, we are a part of a US based organization. So, and during the pandemic, I think we hired so many people outside the usual office locations that we have. And it has been interesting that we now actually have a geographic presence almost all across the country, which we did not have earlier. And it's a beautiful amalgamation. So we don't see any difficulty. Our employees are happy. We are engaged. And I think we have become location agnostic. So with those words, Dr. Jatinder, I'll hand it over back to you. I hope I've been able to throw some lights and thoughts on what I think about diversity and inclusion.
Thank you, Indranaji, for such a wonderful talk. And you, in fact, spoke from your heart when you discussed some of the practical aspects and also some of the issues which are being faced by, challenges faced by the industry as such. Thank you very much. In fact, we'll be making a white paper out of this, and we'll be incorporating most of the thoughts that you have already shared with the delegates. Thank you very much. And now with this, I'd like to invite our next distinguished panelist, Dr. Jitendra Agarwal. And Dr. Agarwal is the founder and CEO of Sarthak Educational Trust. Who other than him can actually, when we talk of walk the talk, he is the person who is actually walking the talk, and he is a role model and exemplar for all of us to emulate. Over to you, Dr. Jitendra Agarwal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jatinder ji, for inviting us and sharing our perspective for people with disability. When we talk about diversity, I think people with disabilities is very important part of this inclusion journey. So maybe a little bit about the historic part, that how we started in 2008. We started Sarthak, and with the whole idea to integrate them in the private sector, in the corporate jobs, because initially when I realized challenge faced by people with disability, I found that most of the Indian corporates in 2008 were not hiring people with disability. They generally used to ask that how a disabled person will come in my company, what they will eat, and how they will come. So I think, and and blame doesn't goes to corporate, because there is lack of awareness during that 2008 era of time, because generally people talk about policies, that we don't have policy to hire people with disability, we don't have accessibility, and it was really challenging. And how I came to this sector, because I used to be dentist in 2004 after I lost my central vision. And when I realized challenge faced by myself, I realized what about people with disability? But because when we talk about numbers of people with disability, World Bank and WHO says it's around 10 to 15 crores. It's a 10 to 15 crore means it's a huge number. And how to include them into private sector jobs? Because of course we have mandate from the government of 3 to 4%, but how many are getting jobs because of lack of education and lot more challenges in that sector. So 2008 we started on two principles. One was demand creation in the market, and second was supply chain of people with disability. 2008 to 13, 5 years of our initial journey, around 60,000 youth with disability participated in our job fairs from Srinagar to Chennai and from Ahmedabad to Guwahati, and 3,000 got the job. And on creating this thing demand in the market, we used to organize roundtable conferences with the sectoral leaders, maybe IT, BPO, retail, hospitality, manufacturing, and then they used to participate. And few of the corporates who hired people with disability used to share. So it's like stakeholder engagement and then hiring of people with disability. So by 2013, I think around 100 corporates were ready to hire in few numbers of people with disability. And then we realized what is the challenge now of why not 57,000 people with disability are employable. So we found that challenge like market skill set of people with disability is not matching with the market requirement, and we have to plan structured training program. So 2014, then we started first center. So with God grace, now we operates in 18 states of India. Around 35,000 youth with all disability, people with physical, hearing impairment, mild intellectual disability are employed. In 2008, where not a single employer was there, now we have 2,500 employers who are ready to hire people with disability. So there is a transformation that happens in last 13 to 14 years. So I'll share for the sake of audience that how it started, like how diversity started in BPO sector. So when we talk about BPO, initially people were hesitant, but maybe like as mentioned by most of the panelists, it's like top to bottom. So we talked to two BPOs, CEOs, and shared that there were candidates that were interviewed by these CEOs. They found that of course they are able to make 100, 150, 200 calls better than a non-disabled employee. So why they don't now? Why not to hire people with disability? They called their CHRO, and the journey started in two BPOs. So as far as hiring of people with disability, there are some little bit workplace solution that we use, like people who are blind can work on computers these days by using these screen reading softwares. People who are hearing impaired need sign language interpreter support. People with physical disability needs accessibility inside the premises. And I think most of our IT and BPO corporates now hire, starting from Wipro, IBM to any multinational who hire people with disability. How to do that? So we came up with some workplace solution that, okay, there is a hearing impaired person who is there on the counter. So there is a card that is there, and it's written that my name is blah blah. I'm not able to hear and speak. You can write. You can do the communication by writing down on the paper. So I think it was successful initially with Vishal Mega Mart, with lifestyle stores, and then subsequently most of the retail corporates started hiring people with all disabilities now, and people with the mild autistic, mild or Down syndromes are hired with retail sector now. I think Future Group and Reliance has done some wonderful pilots, and it's scaling up now, hiring of people with intellectual disability. Coming to the hospitality, I think 2009-10, ITC and Lemon Tree were keen because their top management was ready to hire people with disability. But CHRO has some resistance that how a hearing impaired person will work in hospitality. So similar, we came up with some solutions that, okay, there is a hearing impaired person, how he is going to take an order. So that similar card is there. There will be a buddy with the SHI candidate, and if any challenge, he can communicate initially. But I think it was successful, and customer used to write the order, and the SHI candidate used to deliver that order to the customer. So there is no, you can say, there is no challenge in that, and now it's a successful in hospitality. Most of the hospitality, we talk about IHG, Marriott, or Costa Coffee. So all the restaurant and most of the MNCs, hotels are hiring people with all with different disability, but mostly people who are hearing impaired. And similarly in e-commerce sector. So e-commerce, I think it's a sector which is rising in India now, and especially during COVID, I think. So like Amazon, Flipkart, Walmart, or most of the brands are hiring people with disability. There also we created workplace solutions. So like that, now 10 sectors are hiring people with disability. Now coming to how to do inclusion of people with disability for newcomers in this sector. So it's a structured program that we implement on ground. So any new corporates who comes to us, first we do a scientific study called job mapping, do a job analysis that, okay, what is the profile, in what profile, what disability is going to work, what will be the workplace solution. That report will go to the CHRO, and then they will identify some profile to initially hire people with disability. Secondly, we work inside the newcomer corporates that, okay, how is the physical accessibility and how is the ICT, IT accessibility, because especially for people with blindness, it's very important. So we work on these two things, do the auditing, and with the help of different vendors, we provide these accessibility services to the corporates. Once job mapping is ready, accessibility is ready, now third part comes the recruitment of people with disability. It's also a lot of training is required for the HR managers, that how to advertise a job. See, generally we advertise in a newspaper, but if it's not accessible for people with different disability, maybe for hearing impaired, so there's a standard format where they have to advertise the job for different disability. Then how to do the interview, that is also important, because if there is a blind person sitting in front of you and you are doing interview, so there is a protocol that they have to follow. After interview, there is a selection, and how to do onboarding of people with disability, that is also very structured thing. And then after the onboarding, how to do the training. So this recruitment to onboarding to the training piece is very important, and we provide these services to newcomer corporates who wants to hire people with disability. So after this onboarding, when a candidate with disability comes to any new corporate, so we do a workshop, sensitization workshop with the supervisor, where this person is going to work with the manager and with the middle management also, to know them. Of course, they are people with disability, but they have different abilities, and they are going to perform better than non-disabled employees. So there might not be a challenge. And last step that we follow is post-placement follow-up, because that is a very important. See, generally 3 years of a time is a challenging time, initial days for initial corporates, for people who have recently started hiring, and there is a our team is in direct contact with the HR manager, with the parents of people with disability and PWD, so that if any challenge, we can provide solution to them. Like it was 2011, I still remember in IBM, there was a candidate with physical disability, was on wheelchair, and they used to provide a cab till Noida, and the candidate was there in Ghaziabad. And early morning, he used to wake up at 4 o'clock and come to Ghaziabad at 6 p.m. There is a cab. So we requested the HR manager, if you can provide cab to this candidate to till Ghaziabad, he will be able to come comfortably. So they provided. So like that, these small reasonable accommodations are required for people with disability when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So you can say in last 13 years of our journey, what we have realized that people with physical disability are comfortably hired. They are included. People with hearing impaired and people with blindness are also accepted. But challenge comes to people with intellectual disability. So there are some successful pilot we have done in hospitality, retail, and in BPOs with people who are autistic, Down syndrome, people with cerebral palsy, but still there is scaling up is required, and the new word that has come is neurodiversity for people with disability. So we are focusing on that part and hoping that most of our intellectual disability people are hired in Indian corporates. So in the end, I like to say that journey has started in last 13 years, 14 years, and now you can say scaling up is required. And now we are hoping that these people with disability needs to be become managers, general managers, and maybe represent them in the boardroom. So this is my pray to the God that in coming years they are also will be decision maker in the Indian corporates. Thank you very much, Jatinder ji.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for sharing your perspective, and you actually understand the ground real. Who better than you can understand the ground realities of mainstreaming when we are talking of diversity, equality, and inclusion. And now your mission for actually mainstreaming the cognitive and disability is one of the important milestones. I'm sure that you will win this battle also. We have seen you winning many, battles, and the culmination of winning these battles will be winning a war. So I'm sure that you are treading the right path at this point in time, and we are with you, sir, all the time as a chamber. Anything you need in terms of, creating any sort of or evangelizing mainstream PWD, we are always there. We are always there at your back to get your guidance and advice. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Now with this, I'd like to invite our distinguished panelist from academia, Professor K.N. Bhatt. Professor Bhatt is from the GB Pant Social Science Institute from the Allahabad Central University. I'll request you, sir, to kindly share your perspective with the August audience. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Jatinder ji. Your practitioners has really spoken and opened my eyes. I'm not that practitioners among those practitioners of the industry. As a professor, I have some ideas about this topic. I would like to introduce it. I think DEI is essential for a just and sustainable world. That is what I feel, as I understand. The differences in society, the differences in cultures, differences in communities, differences in genders, and all this. Therefore, to include everyone, I am saying that sustainable world is required and include everyone for all these kind of social welfare and social justice. To build resilient and sustainable business strategies, companies must understand, historically rather, how power, privilege, and history have impacted people differently. I say this understanding that USA is one of the best example to say a few words about it here. Before the passage of the civil rights law in USA, how differences were treated, how blacks were treated. From there only, this concept of DEI began in the history of this topic. I just mentioned this. To address deep disparities and systemic challenges, companies need to examine failures of whole system, why it fails, identify tangible opportunities to improve their own diversity efforts, and rebuild equitable structures at both the individual and system level to achieve social justice. This is what I feel at the opening of this talk. And the strategies for approaches to DEI include one, the talent attraction and retention is the best strategy for any organization to aspire for DEI approaches. And new business relationships required. As people come from diverse backgrounds, they have different understandings of the businesses, different understanding, different relationships, different marketing ideas. Innovative products and service development is required in these settings, and enhanced governance and decision making is required to initiate the DEI in any organization. And responding to stakeholder interest is understood by the senior management of any company. And DEI stands, as I feel here, DEI. One second. Sorry, sir. Excuse me for just a second. लेक्चर दे रहे हो तुम खड़ करते Extremely sorry for that.
No issue, sir. Please go ahead.
I'm extremely sorry for that. So diversity is the presence of differences within a given setting. That is understood by us. Equity is the process of ensuring that processes and programs are impartial, fair, and provide equal possible outcomes for every individual. That is required for this. DEI is vital for creating and maintaining a successful workplace based on the principle that all people thrive personally and professionally. Every employee feels valued at work, making sure that every individual knows and feels they are welcome at the organization. If the belonging is not there, if the position is not there, and then DEI may not be successful. There is a theoretical model which we call a real model of DEI. A real means R. R for reveal relevant opportunities. The employee joins you. If you don't reveal what are his or her opportunities in your organization, he or she will never feel at home. Elevate equity. If you are biased on race, culture, color, gender, then never it will be equal. Then what are your policies? You reveal to the employee who is joining you, who is aspiring to be part of the family. Then you need to reveal that. You need to communicate. Communication is the real world. If the CEOs, if the higher top management is not revealing what they aspire from the employee who is coming to your organization, that will never work. Activate diversity, and really in action you need to do it, and lead inclusively. If you don't inclusively include people, and it will never help you in going for this potential. Five powerful ways to the real action, as theoretically I understand, are change conversation. Communication is the best thing. Even if when an employee comes, hello, hi, how are you? That makes a big difference to any employee in any organization. And map network connections and across boundaries. People come from different backgrounds. You have marketing linkages. You have so many things to do, accomplish through your companies. Then if you not understand who comes from where, how the employee can be networked to your marketing strategies and boundaries, then it never helps the organization. Boost coaching, mentoring, and sponsoring. Coaching is required. Your middle management is crucial in this aspect of doing this. Analyze talent practices. Yes, what are the talents of the employee? There are so many hidden talents. If there is no dialogue, if there is no communication, then you never understand what he stands for. I'm presenting here some findings, international study of an international study, that is McKinsey findings. According to McKinsey series investigating business case for diversity, why diversity matters 2015 and 2018 studies. I quote, not only the business case remains robust, but also relations between diversity on executive terms and the likelihood of financial outperformance strengthen over years when you practice DEI. Companies should pay much greater attention to inclusion even when they are relatively diverse. These findings emerge from largest data sets so far, encompassing 15 countries and more than 1,000 large companies. Latest analysis reaffirms strong business case for both gender diversity and ethnic and cultural diversity in corporate leadership. The most diverse companies are now more likely than ever to perform less diverse peers on profitability. McKinsey 2019 analysis finds companies in the top quintile for general diversity on executive teams were 25% more likely to have above average profitability than companies in the fourth quintile, up from 21% in 2017 and 15% in 2014. So this is the finding of the McKinsey study. Another finding is companies with more than 30% women executives were more likely to outperform companies where the percentage ranged from 10 to 30%. A substantial differential likelihood of outperformance was 48%. In the case of ethnic and cultural diversity, findings are equally compelling. In 2019, top quintile companies outperformed those in fourth by 36%. Likelihood of outperformance continues to be higher for diversity in ethnicity than for gender. Yes, ethnicity is greater contributor than gender. And in US and UK, female representation on executive teams rose from 15% in 14 to 20% in 2018. But unfortunately, across the globe, gender diversity moved up just 1 percentage point to 15% in 19 from 14% in 2017. More than a third of the companies still have no women at all on their executive teams. This is the global finding. Similarly, representation of ethnic minorities on UK and US executive teams stood at only 13% in 19, up from 7% in 14. This is still very less representation. At global level, it was 14% in 19, up from 12% in 2017. In financial services, technology and healthcare sectors, studies for the three indicators of inclusion, equity, openness, and belonging, high levels of negative sentiment by 63% to 80% employees across the industries were found about equality and fairness of opportunities. Whatever theoretically we may say about DEI, but the global findings suggest that negative sentiments are 63% to 83%. In case of work environment, openness, which encompasses bias and discrimination, negative sentiment range from 38% to 56%. These are the findings of McKinsey, and very few. One scholar, Stephanie Creary's findings are there is a wide gap between organizations engaging in DEI work and those that are actually valuing it. This is what Stephanie Creary, Wharton Management Professor, has clearly noted. Key issues that DEI experts and their organizations currently face in respect to diversify are lack adequate staff and financial resources to create programs and initiatives designed to improve employees' experiences and workplace outcomes. DEI experts often lack power and authority to drive change processes. Middle managers struggle to understand their role in DEI work and have been less committed to doing the work. What are the actions required? I will conclude with a few points that globally come as enhanced representation of diverse talent. If you fail to enhance diverse talent of the employees, it will not help the organization to include DEI strategies in your programs. Strengthen leadership, accountability, and capabilities. Enable equality of opportunity through fairness and transparency. Promote openness and tackle microaggressions. Foster belonging through unequivocal support for multivariate identity. Reward distributed based on people's actual effort must be same across groups. If you discriminate, then your actual DEI will fail. Merit objectivity evaluated and applied. Incentivizing and rewarding for DEI work. Merit framework for valuing DEI work, accounting for both objective and subjective notions of merit. DEI goals need to be concrete, measurable, and actionable. Elevate DEI work internally and externally. Require leaders and managers to participate in behavior-based DEI trainings. Identify leaders and non-managerial employees willing to serve as DEI sponsors. Treat DEI work as core rather than peripheral work. And I conclude by saying that make DEI a moment in this world of discrimination, caste, caste, gender, and then if you want to profit from the differences and different talents of the people across your company, make it a moment to include in your company that kind of differences and DEI work. I quote, DEI is a competitive advantage. This is competitive advantage. We teach in economics comparative advantage. I'm saying here competitive advantage in terms of the business language. DEI is a competitive advantage when it comes to hiring companies that recruit a diversity of candidates, create inclusive and equitable work environment that encourage diverse employees to stay, will win the war for talent. This is Rusty O. Kelly, MD, Russell Ronalds Associates. Friends, create diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplace. Then only your social welfare goal, your corporate goal, and your inclusiveness goal will accomplish. Thank you very much, particularly for the organizers and Professor Dr. Jatinder ji. Thank you indeed for asking me to be the part of this talk. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Professor Bhatt, for such a wonderful talk and giving vivid statistics, which is very, very important to understand, so that one understand that where we are and where we should go to. And at the end, you concluded by saying that mainstreaming DI is basically a competitive advantage, and you related this to the economics. Definitely, it is a business imperative. It is not a burden. It's not something that's a part of mandate or compliance. It is basically a competitive differentiator which can actually aid, organizations to steadfast their competitors. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Professor Bhatt. Thank you, sir. Now with this, I will request our next distinguished panelist, Mr. Ravinder Singh ji. Mr. Ravinder Singh is the CEO of Skill Council for Persons with Disability. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Singh, for inviting me. I'd like to thank PhD Chamber of Commerce and Dr. Singh for inviting me to this panel of discussion. It's always a great pleasure to be part of such eminent panelists and discussing. While it's so inspiring to hear Dr. Jitendra Agarwal and his work and how he has convinced the industry to come forward and mainstream differently abled people, it's equally fascinating to hear Professor Bhatt on the advantages of mainstreaming differently abled people. To come to what we do as a council, we work very closely with the government and the industry to understand the different job roles that can be adopted and adapted for differently abled people. In taking the advantage of the COVID, where we could not do much work in actual field implementation or training, we have worked and interacted with the industry very closely to understand how many job roles that can be taken up for mainstreaming differently abled people. And we currently have about close to 183 qualifications on the National Qualification Register approved by the government. Another 60 have been submitted for approval, and within the next 3 months, another about 100 will be submitted for approval. So you'll have a gamut of close to 300 plus qualifications available for various organizations in the industry to take up trainings for differently abled people and mainstreaming. But that brings to us the bigger challenge of the ecosystem where the training can be done and the funding for the training. While the various NGOs, etc., have been doing work, the structured government intervention was something that was lacking. We have been following up with NCVT very, very closely. And thanks to the support of Professor Punia and Professor Sahatabuddhi, AICT is now agreed that in all their vocational training programs, they will mandatorily incorporate 5% vocational training free of cost for PWDs. So that's a big step for us. And hopefully we'll be able to have larger number of trainings taking place through their infrastructure. But that brings an interesting thought to my head. And I've been sharing with this thought with a number of other organizations also. And I would like to park it with Dr. Jatinder Singh to be taken up as a policy matter if possible. While the industry is training differently abled people, they need to be encouraged and incentivized a little. So if the CSR under the Schedule 7, if an additional item can be added, which is the vocational trainings for PWDs, and a leverage be given to the industries that if 10% of the funds that they are spending on CSR, if 10% of those funds are spent on training of differently abled people, because CSR training doesn't allow people to hire on their own roles. But for PWDs, if it can be given a leverage that 10% of the funds or 5% of the funds can be used for training of differently abled people so that they can be absorbed in their own organization, I think it will be an incentive to the industry. And it will go a big way in making funds available for training of differently abled people. These are the 2-3 broad ideas that we are working with. And as a council now, what we have also done is we have realized that there is a requirement of developing a foundation training for differently abled people at the school level. If you look at the vocational level in vocational training in schools, they start from class 9th onwards. But many times our specially abled children or young adults face difficulty in undergoing those trainings because the foundation training is lacking. We have developed 4 modules for speech and hearing impaired, visually impaired, locomotor disability, and cognitive and neurological on the neurologically challenged people. These 4 pre-vocational modules are in the process of getting submitted to the government for approval so that they can be implemented from class 5th itself. So 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, they start becoming part of the curriculum, both for the special schools and for the schools which have differently abled children in their ecosystem, and also training modules for the teachers to train on this. That's what something also we are working on. With these, I think we'll be able to adequately equip our children to take up vocational training and also work closely with the industry along with the help of PhD Chamber of Commerce and other industry bodies to convince industry to hire. But the industries also need to be incentivized, and that's where I seek support of Dr. Singh. And if a policy or a concept note can be shared with the government on this, that one can look at incentivizing the industry under the CSR spendings, if some portion can be allowed to be spent for training for PWDs to be taken on their own roles. So with that, thank you very much. Wish you all the best.
Thank you, Ravinder Singh ji, for sharing your perspective. And you rightly pointed out that the need of the hour is to actually have the corporate skin in the game in terms of mainstreaming PWD. And as a part of CSR activity, I think some budget can be earmarked, particularly for mainstreaming PWD, particularly in terms of developing their skills, making them more educated, making them more competent and skilled in different domains. Thank you very much for sharing a very important perspective and while making the representation and white paper on this subject will definitely incorporate this point also. Thank you, sir. Now with this, I'd like to invite our next distinguished speaker, Ms. Uma Rao. Ms. Uma Rao is the Vice President Human Resources from Ashok Leyland. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, first of all, sir, for having me over, and to PhD CCI for arranging such a relevant and excellent session in today's context. I think you mentioned, sir, about United Nations and its push in this direction. And I think the good news for us in India is from 2021, the India Inc. Has accepted gender as a priority, and it's stated it. So I think it's a very good thing for our country that this has been taken up as one of the things all companies will try to drive as much as possible. Now, one of the speakers talked about women on boards, Professor Singh, he talked about women on boards. Yes, definitely it's an issue that we don't have enough women in boards. And the women who are in the boards are also mostly independent directors. They are not, people who rise from the companies and get onto the boards of the company like the men do. But I think we should see the silver lining in this situation. From a situation of 5.9%, today we've gone to 11.4% in boards in India, represented by women. And I think it's a good thing. Now, I often ask this question, what is the significance of having one woman on the board? You should have more than one, because if the person is one, anyway, again, she's a minority and very little chance that, she will be heard as much as one should be. So this is, but I think we should look at the positive side. Things are getting better. The other things which are not very encouraging, of course, is, the female labor force, participation in labor force has decreased from 34% to 24%. And we all have to really examine the reasons why such a thing is happening. Why are they not coming? Are we not creating enough conditions for people to come and work? Are there so many hurdles? One example that I will give is, we don't find people, women who come into the sales function, sales and marketing. They don't like to come into that because they have to travel long distance. They have to travel to Mofussil towns and villages and all that in many professions, and they don't find it comfortable. The reason is not so much safety and security, but very simple reason that there are not enough public toilets on the way. This is a real issue. If you don't have public toilets for women, it is very difficult to take a 10-hour journey, 12-hour journey, 6-hour journey. So while they want to do, it's a very practical problem that they face. That's why when we had an opportunity to represent through the CII and other forums, we said, when Mr. Gadkari approves the roads plan, he should actually insist that after every 20 kilometers or 10 kilometers, there's a toilet, proper toilet, which can be used by the women. So I think a lot of these things should happen. And if your body also can push for this, I think it will be very, very useful to have women come. And then you will see definitely more women will participate in the labor force. There is also another concern, which is of the widening pay gap. It's increasing. 27% was the difference in white collar, and it's much higher when it comes to unorganized or blue collar. So this is also something that needs to be seen. Another feature, broadly, before I get to my organization, is gig workers happening now. Thanks to this COVID, one of the positive fallouts is a hybrid workplace. And, this offers a lot of opportunity for women to actually participate in the workforce. And the statistics tells us that 61% of the gig workers are women. That means, there is a huge potential in that area. And we as a country should use this more so that, we can have women over there. Now, obviously, all the speakers have spoken about what doesn't happen right when you don't have women. And I think everybody knows it. So there is low performance, there is low, this ESG that we talk about is greatly impacted. The environment, safety and governance is greatly impacted when you don't have women. And that's why one of the important points in the agenda of ESG is to have more women in the organization to reduce the risk of the organization. Now, yes, the governance risk is very costly today. Companies would not like to pick it up. What is not seen often and talked about much is that the employer brand reduces greatly when you don't have enough women. I would like to give an example. In one of the IT companies, there was a delegation from the client side who had come to visit. And when they saw that all the presentations were made by men, and everywhere there were only men, they said, you know, we would not like to work with you because we don't see any diversity in your teams. So you see, it's not about what I like, you like, and others like. It's about what is the economic imperative for the country and the organization. And to that extent, I really wanted to compliment Mr. Agarwal, who is running this whole physical disability piece. I think it's a remarkable thing, and if most organizations pick it up, the employer brand is going to touch new heights, unimaginable heights. Now, coming to what companies are doing, there are many things which different companies are doing. And one of the things that I would like to talk about is we are looking at diversity at four verticals. One is the geographic diversity. Like India is such a vast and diverse country. It will be really sad if we don't utilize people from across the length and breadth of the country to form our workforce. Now, most of the times people concentrate only in one place, and I think that's a big casualty. So, please spread and capture the whole pool of the country. That's great. Second vertical is of the gender that we've been talking about. The third one is about the ability or the disabilities, as one may understand. I think this is also very, very important for us to look at. And because it increases the empathy, appreciation, as well as compassion in an organization, which I think is very important. And the fourth one, which is often neglected, is the thought diversity. People have to think differently for innovation to happen. If everybody agrees with each other and the yes-manship continues, then we can never have innovation in that company. And today, companies, if they don't constantly innovate and reinvent themselves, I think they will become irrelevant very soon. We have so many examples, right from the Kodak films to any number of products that you can think of, including our Bajaj two-wheeler, which has become less popular compared to others because they have not done reinvention. I think this is very important, right? And what is important in companies is, how do you deal with this whole group thing? And so all the men think in a particular way, and the whole company then follows that particular way of thinking. So how can we change that and avoid that tendency of group thing to come in, the boys club, so to speak, right? A social dialogue as far as diversity is concerned is very important. And social dialogue meaning, get people together across the organization to sit down and simply just talk about how we can make this a better workplace. I think that's very important because when you talk, your mind opens, perspectives come into the picture, and people understand. Again, thanks to the pandemic, hybrid workplaces are a reality now. And I think it's a great, if we can leverage this going forward also and not make regimented workplaces, but give some, free space for people to breathe. Our company being in the automobile sector has got so many men. It's predominantly men. But I think we have started the Women Leadership Program like Indrani spoke. We have a driver training institute where complete batches of women drivers are being trained over there. And we're also looking at women in the shop floor. So we've done this wonderful experiment in Uttarakhand plant where we went to the Pahadi areas, convinced the parents to let their daughters come and work in the plant. And we give them a stipend to manage themselves. And we also give them a hostel for the girls to stay inside the plant and work over there in a secure environment. And this has been one of the biggest things because of quite a few girls have got employment like this, and they have made their life from being extremely poor to now a reasonable level of life. And this was the learn and earn scheme that we did. So they would learn for 5 days and work 1 day in the plant to understand what they have learned. So I think these are things which are very, very important. And one of the reasons why women don't come in is because technical skills are missing. And I think we are going on an overdrive in our organization to impart more technical skills to women so that, they stake their claim as far as promotions are concerned, roles are concerned, and growth is concerned. There is a lot that one can do But these are some of the things that we have been doing in our organization. We have set up a networking platform so that women can just get together and talk, express themselves, work on what policies are to be changed. We have changed a lot of our travel policies because of the feedback from this networking platform. So I think policies have to change, skills have to be enhanced, and networking opportunity for people, because women do not go in the evening to forums to network. So create a forum inside the organization so that they can talk to each other and spend some time and learn and also express themselves. So in a nutshell, sir, these are some of the things that we have done. And I'm very privileged to listen to everybody else and their ideas. So thank you very much once again.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Rao, for sharing your perspective. And Ashok Leland is one of the pioneers in terms of, observing all DEI principles, and we are seeing from mountain time in terms of the standings your organization has taken, particularly in this room. Thank you very much for sharing the success story and also your personal perspective. Thank you. With this, now I'd like to invite our distinguished co-chairs of HRIR committee, Mr. Ashish Vik, to give the concluding remarks and vote of thanks. Over to you, Mr. Ashish Vik.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm still in the car, as you can see, and it'll take me some more time. While all the speakers have said, talked, it has been really, really enlightening for all of us, I'm sure, to listen to this very, very important topic. मैं आपसे थोड़ा share ये करना चाहूँगा that when I did come to know about this topic that we will be discussing today, मैं सोचता था कि India is very well known for its culture and its role in involving all the types and classes of people. तो हुआ क्या है? Where have we gone wrong? And believe me, when I was going through some of the data, it mentioned very clearly that if we go back to the Mahabharata times, you go to the Ramayana times, you go to other mythological times, there are recordings of transgender people in the mainstream. For example, we all remember Shikhandi. Very, very well-known character person in the Mahabharata. And I don't know how many of you know that when Shri Ram was in exile, went to exile, and his people from his kingdom went along with him, उनको वापस भेजा गया और वहाँ पर उनके साथ ट्रांसजेंडर इंडिविजुअल्स थे जो उनके साथ गए और उनको फिर ये बूंद दिया गया कि आप लोग किसी भी अच्छे ओकेजन में, शादी में, ब्याह में, चाइल्ड होने पे अगर आप आशीर्वाद देंगे, that will fructify. That is there. You come down to Mughals, you all must have seen or read that at that time also these people were there considered to be good guards in the harems. So there was always a history of, people working together, people staying together. Then probably came the Britishers, and as I was reading, 1871 was the Criminal Tribes Act, जहाँ से फिर ये differentiation शुरू हो गया. And क्योंकि हम पे राज हुआ इतने साल, तो फिर अब ये चीज हमारे अंदर आ गई. But anyway, आ गई तो अब हमें इसको face करना है. And it's very nice to see that all of us are now thinking about these three alphabets, I would say, diversity, equality, and inclusion. And it is going across all the verticals of the industry. The government is taking it very seriously. In fact, we have now also been reading about the vacancies the government is taking out in the defense forces, encouraging ladies to come in, which is very, very welcome. In fact, मैं आपके साथ share करूं, एक हमारे मित्र हैं, बहुत अच्छे और अच्छे builder हैं, very well known builder, and he told me once, he says, Ashish, we have started this experiment of training women to work as masons. And he says the results have been phenomenal because by temperament, a woman is neat, so she does a neat job. By temperament, she's more punctual than a man, so she finishes the job on time. So, I mean, it is just a small thing which he tried and it became a success. तो ऐसे ही मेरा ख्याल है हम लोग सब अपने अपने इंडस्ट्री में अगर जैसे अभी बताया कि वुमेन पार्टिसिपेशन कम है उसको इंक्रीज करना है तो आई थिंक ये जैसे बिल्डर हैं इस सेगमेंट में ऐसे हम लोग इंक्रीज कर सकते हैं जो लेडीज अभी गांव में बैठी हैं वो आ सकती हैं मेन स्ट्रीम में काम कर सकती हैं और डिसेबिलिटी के ऊपर तो अभी हमने बहुत ही अच्छा सुना how the initiatives are being taken, what are the steps they do right from getting the advertisement out, right till the placement and thereafter. It is phenomenal. But हमको बहुत सारा काम करना है. And I think Jitendra and Mr. R.P. Singh, our chairman, he will also agree that PhD is there with you. PhD is there. We cover, I think, 20 states. एंड जहां आपको हमसे मदद चाहिए जहां पर आपको चाहिए कि हम आपके साथ खड़े हों with all the stakeholders be the government we are there with you and I mean I'm sure together we will do extremely well वो दो लाइनें हैं ना जी मैंने कल भी किसी को बताई थी तेरा हाथ हाथ में हो अगर तो सफर ही असले हयात है हमारे हर कदम पे है मंजिलें तेरा साथ जो मेरे साथ है and that is what the chamber is that is what the industry is and we will all work together. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your concluding remarks and also giving vote of thanks to all our distinguished panelists. In fact, all the discussions and also insights and recommendations to include DEI agenda in the corporate parlance is very, very relevant and useful. And the valuable recommendations of all the distinguished panelists have provided impetus in this area. So with this, I'm thankful to all and particularly to our distinguished panelists, Mr. Shakun Khanna, Ms. Indrani Ghosh, Dr. Jitendra Agarwal, Professor Kian Bhatt, Mr. Ravinder Singh, and Ms. Uma Rao, and also our chair, Mr. R.P. Singh, and co-chair, Mr. Ashish Bik, for sharing their perspective in this very important and pertinent program. And we look forward to your esteemed presence and guidance and advice in all our future endeavors, particularly in this area. Thank you very much. See you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.